So basically, we are talking about doing a PhD in Germany. So right now, although there is a crisis, Germany is probably one of the few countries with a very good landscape in terms of funding. And funding actually over the last years increased dramatically into research. On the graph there you can see that last year they achieved 3% of GDP, and the majority of that funding comes actually from industry, and then there are the partners from government and other organizations. It is very important to know that in Germany research is done at universities, of course, but also non-university research institutions. You can be a PhD student at either place, but there are significant differences. So it's quite straightforward with a university. You just apply to a professor or to a program and become a student. You're registered with the university. There are certain regulations what you need to fulfill. And your thesis supervisor is then your official mentor, so Dr. Vater or Dr. Mutter in German. If you join a research institute, usually you can come on a scholarship, but usually you would be employed. So in my institute, you just employed on a half a position of a researcher in the first year, and in the second, third year, and further, it's a 65% of a normal research position. This means you get all social security payments, but also benefits. So you're basically working as a research assistant, and you're allowed to do a PhD. But you have to comply with regulations of a university. So you would need to go for a separate procedure to register at the university as a PhD student. And the right to award degree, confer degree, sits with the department of a university. So there's no national regulation about doing a PhD, or it's a doctor, usually rerum naturalem, or some other doctoral degrees. It's not even at a state level, because Germany is federal state. It's not a university level regulation. It's a department regulation. So each department, there is quite a strong autonomy of universities, and it's a department that decides who can be a PhD student and what they have to do to fulfill, to finish the thesis, and what are the rules also about publishing a thesis. We as an institute provide services to students in terms of when we select students, that we try to check their eligibility later to register with the university, and also help with all the procedures at the university, but we can't guarantee that. So this is still a bit for you to be aware. And it's quite often that you can be, you can join a junior group at a research institute, but that person, your supervisor, would not be eligible to be an official supervisor of a PhD at a university. So then you would need to find, and that's usually where an office is helping, or your supervisor is helping, to find a professor at the university who is then your official supervisor, even if they actually are not really aware of what you're doing. So this is quite important to be aware. Do we have a laser? I just mentioned here that at the bottom there are two links. I presume you would have the access to the slides. So the first link refers to so-called Hochschulrektors Conference. It's rectors of all universities, and there is a database there to search for degrees at the university. So if you want to find a PhD place at the university in Germany, this would be a good link for you. The other one is DAD. It's a German academic exchange service, and they also have a very good database to search for programs to do masters or to do a PhD, also specifically in English, so international PhD programs. Because now it's more and more common that this the structured PhD education is done through programs, and they're international. So all training is done in English, and you don't need to worry about German. So those two links would be useful for you. So in addition to all the universities that we have, there are these non-university research organizations, and we have 4 of them. So it's a very diverse landscape of research institutions. My center is member of the Helmholtz Association. This is the largest research organization in Germany. It's 18 centers, it's national centers, so large of research facilities and infrastructure, so everything which is to do like synchrotron, or there's a DLR, so a research center for space research and aerospace. It's a huge organization. So they all belong to Helmholtz Association. The Max Planck Society is also a large organization with 80 institutes. Helmholtz research is done only in science and technology. There are 6 main areas which I will mention later. There are no social sciences or humanities. Whereas at Max Planck Society, the institutes are in all sciences. They are usually small and a bit more focused. The Fraunhofer Gesellschaft is another association that is about 80 institutes, with 66, okay. This is an organization of applied research. So this is where you go if you are really interested to do something very close for industry. They are funded very differently. The state funds only the basic infrastructure, but all the research that they do contract research. So they need to get funding from some organization. It can be a state organization if it's a survey for sociology studies, or it can be a pharma, or it can be some company that needs a particular study. And then you basically employ to work on that project. And there's Leibniz Association, another organization. It's a little bit historically how it developed. These are research centers which have larger importance than just for state. So, for example, state of Berlin or state of Essen, but not maybe a national importance like Helmholtz Center. So it's something in between. They're usually quite interdisciplinary focused. And for you, maybe it would be interesting to know on campus where our center is. There's an institute, one of Leibniz Association Institutes of Molecular Pharmacology, and that's probably quite relevant for quite a few of you. So at the Helmholtz, as I mentioned, there are 6 different areas, and one of them is health. And within health, we have some centers which are very specifically focused. So, for example, German National Center for Cancer Research, DKZ, in Heidelberg. So, as name suggests, it's focused on cancer research, although, of course, there are some studies related to other diseases. My center is a Center for Molecular Medicine, which, by definition, implies research is done there is relevant for many different diseases, so it's not disease-specific. So the centers are quite different. And there's a number of structured PhD programs. And as you can see here, they are listed. And you would have a slide, and there's also a link. So if you're interested to look at what program, for example, this program in infectious diseases, there are a few programs in cancer research, you can follow that link. So to support your studies, you just can apply directly to a professor and see, or professor, they've got some extramural funding or have internal position, and they advertise it, and you just check what is available, if this is the field you want. And at the very bottom, there's a web page called academics.de. So this is a web page where all scientifically related positions are usually advertised. The other way of searching it would be through one of those PhD programs. And as I mentioned already, their web page has the possibility for you really to do a structured search for international PhD programs and then just see. And they have fellowships. Or you can apply for a fellowship to an organization where you can say, okay, I found a professor, he doesn't have money right now, let's get funding for it. And here I mentioned a few of those. So German Academic Exchange Service, there is number 1. So it's the largest fellowship funding organization in the world, actually. And there you can get a half-a-year research fellowship, or you can get the fellowship to cover all your PhD. And what is also good, what I'm included here, they have a database, not only of their own fellowships, but many other organizations. So if you type there what you're looking for, in what field, and this is master or PhD, they would offer you quite a number of different fellowship opportunities. There are very many in-time funds. There's also deadlines indicated. They also offer specifically PhD fellowships. Max Planck Society has their own international PhD programs, so this usually comes with fellowships. And there are some more specific, like Leibniz, there has a specific fellowship program. Actually, deadline is on 7th of March for this year. And here I have included a few links of scholarship databases. It's the best for you to try, check this database and other database, because they can give you links to different organizations through which you can find funding opportunity. So now I'll just come to tell you a little bit about the center that I'm representing here. Max Delbrueck Center for Molecular Medicine is in Berlin. It exists as a center about 20 years, but there is a much longer pedigree, historical history of research on campus where we are. This is a biomedically very strong, relevant campus. There are clinics of Charité, and Charité is the largest clinical medical faculty and hospital in Europe, actually. So there's a quite strong interaction with clinics and focus on translational research. There's also a biotech campus, so there are about 50 companies. And there are 2 academic institutions. So this is the larger one, and I mentioned already, Leibniz Institute for Molecular Pharmacology. At the MDC, our funding is about 100 million a year. 70 million is a co-funding. I remember about 10 years ago, I saw, for example, that all life sciences budget of Ireland was what our institute gets. So basically, it's very significant core funding, plus our institute is very successful also in attracting extramural funding for the research. We have about 65, 70 groups. 11 of them received ERC grants, European Research Council grants. For people who are more involved in science, it's a sort of approval of quality. It's a very competitive scheme. Our staff is very international. In Germany, you would rather see that at universities, there's still very much, both in terms of staff and students, the international proportion of international students or staff would be maybe 16%, I think is the average number. Max Planck institutes are very international, and our institute, we have among all the staff, including technicians and administrative staff, it's 22%. And among our PhD students, for example, we reached about 50%. They are coming from abroad. I just checked that we have about 30 Italians, I think more than 20 PhD students from Italy, and the others are working as researchers or some other stuff. So we have about 1,800 people altogether, and 350 of them are PhD students. So it's quite a large community. So our institute, the main, it's from the way it was organized, it's scientific quality. It's very flat structure. There are no departments, there's director and there are research groups. They are structured in sort of cancer research or neurodegenerative diseases, but this is not administrative. It's only to coordinate the research activities and funding. This is how it comes. There are a number of prizes that our researchers won. I mentioned some. And there was a reasonably recent ranking of research institutes in the field of molecular biology and genetics. Well, any institutions actually of certain size. And the MDC was ranked 14 among 20 best in the world. There were only four in total European institutes in this, in field of molecular biology and genetics. And the other European, it was EMBO, which is an international research organization, or Cancer Research UK, which is, again, it's not a single institute. So in terms of quality of our papers, the other ranking mentioned here, it ranks based on publication quality of our scientists. Our institute is the best research institute in Germany among any, not just in our field, which means the criteria used was that more than 90% of all publications in the field are in the best 10% or the most cited in that field from our center. It's about every week there's a paper with impact factor more than 10, which is one of the quality. In terms of research focus, we have a quite large, and it's a leading in Germany, cardiovascular and metabolic diseases research, then cancer research and diseases of nervous system. And there is, since 2006, a very strong development in medical systems biology. And another focus is also translational research related to all those diseases, where we have guest professors who are clinicians. They lead a clinic in Charité, and they have a research lab in our institute. So there is a possibility for you to work in very basic research or also in a translational field. And this actually is, since 2 years, a very big development, so-called Berlin Institute of Health. It's a major cooperation between our institute and the Charité, with a very substantial amount of funding for joint research in systems medicine. It's in fields which are not disease-specific, but more of a systemic level. This international slide I will skip it just to show that we have quite a number of collaborations also in terms of PhD programs, which come here. So PhD at the MDC organized by Graduate Office, and it provides central services. So for example, I was mentioning that it might be sometimes a bit challenging at the research institute to organize this registration and following all the procedures at the university, especially for a foreigner. So I came to MDC as a coordinator of a PhD program, and when I started, when you look at the university webpage, it's all in German, and all the regulations in German. I mean, for a foreigner, it's of course a daunting perspective to understand what even you need to do to publish your thesis. So now we have secretaries who assist with all that. The central office organizes also soft skills, and this is of course important. So the main thing, of course, you do your research, and it's at the highest level, and hopefully you get very good publications out of it. But what we also provide is a more broad training. So at the end, you're not just a good researcher, but a more accomplished professional. And we have so many students, about half of them just found a professor, came with a scholarship, or professor had money. And there are 5 structured programs, so they really run a regular call for applications and then select students. So there's one in translational cardiovascular research. Same gene is cell signaling and gene regulation. This is a joint program with Israel universities. And this medical systems biology program with New York University. And Mayagrad is a joint program in myology and muscle disease with the Marie Curie University in Paris. And within this international PG programs, you actually have to go to you have a supervision from a collaborator from a partner country, and you have to spend a significant amount of time in that lab. So in New York, for example, it's up to 2 years you can be working in New York, and there's funding for that, and with Israel it's half a year. So I mentioned here when is the next deadline, and you also have an annual review of your progress through a thesis committee. So you're not just with your professor. Even if you're not in one of these structured programs and simply join the MDC, there's still a committee where there's your professor and 2 others. And once a year they review your progress, and you can discuss basically how it all works. And for soft skills, I thought I'll just mention what is planned for this year, simply to show that this career development is supported on a broader level. So for example, this year we have a scientific writing course, then science online and in social media, teaching and supervision, a role to focus research and leadership skills, time and project management, self-management, presentation skills, networking, leadership development, so quite a range of different courses. In April, for example, we organize an annual career day, where there, again we have a number of speakers who will speak about different career opportunities for people who eventually get a PhD, because it's also clear that only a small percentage stay in academia, and you need a broader package of skills and also knowledge where you can apply. So this is what we try to support strongly. So here it's just a little bit as an overview of our training and career development framework. So there are specific courses. There's also career counseling and support, so you can come, and it's actually for postdocs. I'm doing that, and we can discuss what we want to do, what opportunities. We also interact very closely with our alumni, so we can get in touch directly. Just like last week, we were talking with a girl who is thinking about becoming a patent attorney, and we have a few former PhDs who are now patent attorneys, so it's quite easy to get people in touch. We also provide support in terms of funding opportunities, and if you write a grant application or fellowship application, we would also help you. And it's also, some attention is paid for life-work balance, because it's of course very important. So we have every Friday a beer session where people can meet and mix and chat. We have kindergarten directly on campus with free places, and in Berlin it's actually free childcare, so it's very important. Your time can be quite flexibly organized. So maybe we are not doing it perfectly, but we are really feeling this is very important, and we put in an effort. And this is the last slide. It's just a few tips. So what Tatjana already mentioned. I coordinated our PhD program before, and I've seen quite a few applications. So if you decide to apply, please be very selective. Because group leaders, we call them group leaders, professors, they get hundreds of applications, and they really don't read if they get a message, "Dear sir, I'm very interested in cancer research." That's been immediately. Spend some time to really understand who's doing what, and if you're sending an application, it has to be very specific, that people see, okay, you've done your homework, you know exactly what I'm doing, or your last paper on that and that is really what I want to do, so you also understand what they've written. And it's not a number game. It's not, oh, I'll send 100 and something will work out. Better to do 10, but really well-prepared one. I mentioned a few other things. For cover letter and references, this is also important. Don't try to get it from the best possible professor. Usually from abroad, people not necessarily know that he's such an important person in your country, maybe. What is more important, that it's somebody who can really comment very specifically on what you've done. Not like I read lectures in genetics and he was one of 300 students in my class, but this person I supervised for thesis, that he did this experiment, we published this paper, he was, or she has shown very initiative, leadership, or supervising, so this is very important when it's specific. And that people can do it on time. It's quite often that people plan it until last minute and then call in and saying, oh, now my professor is on holidays and I can't reach him and he can't provide the reference. We have a very, very strong competition. We are getting about 800 applications for maybe 15 places. They're of course not all great quality. I mean, it's internet, so everybody can apply, but still, it's very large number, and everything which is not arrived before the deadline is discarded. So I hope this is helpful. This is the brochure. Who didn't get it, you can download it from the webpage.
Thank you very much to Oksana for this very nice and very useful presentation. I can add that DAD, actually in Rome, is in our university, in Sapienza University, the Faculty of Economics. We have the central office for all Italy, so people can easily go there, and they are very helpful. The director is really very good and available for students. Also, thank you for this final part, also because this is music for my ears when I listen to these kind of things, because this is also what we try to teach really the students and the graduates to write very well, not only the CV, but also the motivational lecture, because they have to convince themselves first, and then the rest of the world that they are the good person for that, laboratory, etc. But in research, is it really essential? Maybe in some other positions you can be a little bit more generic sometimes, but for research nowadays we receive so many applications all the time that you really have to explain very well. Any question for Oksana? It's a little bit late, but if there is any burning question for her, we could take it now. Otherwise, we can continue with another Helmholtz institution. We are actually two today, so thank you very much again.
Maybe I'll just mention, it wasn't asked by us to mention, with German, it's helpful if you have a little bit of knowledge, but it's not essential.